And soon after starting HCMI, ISO formed TC260, and I got involved not at the very beginning, but almost the beginning in about 2011. So, hey, there's a group that's trying to put together metrics for HR and how to measure it, which was my passion. So it was sort of a, how could I not be involved in that question? Who benefits from all this? And really, it's like raising the tide. Everyone benefits from HR standard. I want to know, how do we measure and report things and metrics in HR? Oh, we don't have anything like that. So you don't have any generally accepted principles for HR measurement and reporting. No. And so that's the genesis for the ISO TC260. That's the genesis for the standards. And really, the group Raise the Tide and Human Capital Impact is all about raising awareness of standards, particularly ISO 30414, Human Capital Reporting Guidelines, which I would argue is a huge foundational building block, like a cornerstone for what I'd call gap reporting for HR, how to measure and report HR.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a paper and I think it was published as a chapter in a book many years ago where I used that same acronym, is generally accepted HR principles. But just for a while, maybe focusing on 30414, you mentioned this. What is so special about that standard?
Well, one, it's comprehensive. So it has metrics, and that's what it was designed for. And it was really includes a lot of elements about the why and the how, as well as the what. It's not just a collection of a list of metrics, but really it gives more of a story about what is this and why does it matter and who benefits and what are the difference. Even defines the various stakeholder groups. And that comprehensiveness and context that it gives is really valuable and important. Not to mention the fact that it has metrics from every area of what you call talent management lifecycle, as well as things that are more traditional, like health and safety, as well as things that are hot now in various parts of the world around diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think people who've spent a lot of time in one industry or one type of role as HR often make a lot of assumptions that we're all practicing the same HR, that we're using the same definitions. And I'll share one of my stories. Is many years ago, and some people, this doesn't resonate too well with, but I was working for an organization where they defined a department as a larger entity than a division. In other words, a division reported to a department. Okay. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And I was like, whoa. And I remember having an ISO auditor come in and an external auditor come in and do an 9001 audit. And one of the first things I pulled up was my list of, here's the things that we as an organization and culture don't use that are typical to the market. How can you have metrics that are positioned as sort of being universal? Isn't work, industries, government, for profit so different that it requires a completely different kind of reporting? How would you address that question?
Right, of course. I'm complete agreement. That's why in accounting, IFRS and GAAP is completely different and unique for every industry. Oh, no, wait a minute. It's not. It's the same. So what I would push back is these people are saying, well, yes, every company is unique. Every person is unique. Every industry has some unique aspects to it. However, there are common measurements and metrics which are applicable to all. Right. I mean, this enables, speaking of stakeholders, investors to measure apples to apples across companies within an industry, and even, to a lesser extent across industries. Yeah. But not having a standard, everyone can kind of come up with their own metric. Everyone can define it the way they want, which, by the way, organizations do. I would argue the standard itself, both 30414 and other TC260 ISO standards, are taking organizations out of the darkness and into the light. So, as well as raising the tide. Basically, let's give everybody a set of metrics they can all use globally. Investors, stakeholders, governments can all see how you're doing. From an ESG and transparency standpoint, you should report and disclose more of these metrics so you can show that one of your most important stakeholder group, in fact, perhaps your most important stakeholder group, your employees and workforce, here's how you do in terms of managing, building that sustainable asset. And truly, they are the source of your sustainability.
In hindsight, I never thought this would have come from the investor community for all kinds of errant biases. One of them is, this idea that HR has always been moving away from the shareholder, and we want to
Right.
talk about stakeholders. Yet here come the investment community saying, what you do is important, but we need something from you. We need
Yeah.
to have more standardization in the way you communicate your success.
I mean, you think about cost per hire and time to fill, the two most measured things in recruiting. And yet, those are very operational and efficiency. They have nothing to do with effectiveness, meaning, wow, we were really fast and we got that opening filled really quick. But did you get a good hire or did you just get a butt in a seat? Butts and seats quick is what you get when you focus on cost per hire and time to fill. Well, if what organizations and leaders really want, they just don't know what else they should be measuring. Perfect example for why they need other metric is quality of hire. Did we get a good fit? Are they going to stay longer? Are they going to perform better? Are they going to grow within the organization? Is there a metric that we can use or an index of metrics that we can combine to measure that? And in fact, it is what I would call an index metric, meaning it has several different things that make up the quality of hire itself.
I think it separates people who've actually worked in HR from people who have just studied HR. But if you don't have common denominators at the foundation, this is just measuring for the sake of measuring.
Again, what I would argue is metrics and standards force you to be a little more comprehensive as opposed to let's just go over here and work on this. Let's just go over here and work on this, which when I was in HR as a practitioner is what happened. You go, whatever the fire is, it's often all hands on deck or almost all hands on deck. So it's all contextual. And it's to your point, did you improve it? Are you improving it? By the way, any metric, they say, what's a good score? Well, of course you can benchmark it, but continuous improvement is a fantastic way to focus the organization. In fact, I would go so far as to say HR has an opportunity to significantly impact organizational performance and bottom line, far more than accounting and finance, with the possible exception of the tax department.
How do, we often talk about stakeholders, the HR, the investors. What about the IT community in the broad sense? How do they stand to benefit from standards in human resources?
With ISO standards, they can actually, just like with financial reporting standard, international financial reporting standards, GAAP reporting, they have automatic reports that can just come out. And in fact, I would argue, so one of the best aspects of accounting and finance is the balance sheet, the income statement, the cash flow statement, statement of equity, all of that is in essence a standardized set of reports with some standard metrics, and that's what HR needs to truly be on a level playing field, or ultimately where I believe, because the value of most businesses today is their people, their human capital, actually a step ahead of finance. No disrespect intended to my prior career. Getting the right people and allocating those resources and treating them well and motivating them well and rewarding them well and doing all of the areas of elements of talent management is going to give you a huge competitive advantage.
What's success in the next few years?
The short term is, I think, governments, starting with securities agencies, and actually there's legislation in the U.S. Congress, and the new chairman of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has actually said it's going to be one of his earliest priorities, are looking at mandating specific metrics that organizations must report. I think that's going to be the big sea change. But most organizations, rather than disclosing the metrics, they're just using language, flowery language. Oh, we care about our people. We're doing all these things, but they didn't disclose anything. Well, investors are, I'll use their technical term for it, pissed. They wanted more disclosure, and also they want standard disclosure. So when the SEC said, yeah, it's material, every organization report any metrics is material, and organizations talked about it but didn't give any metrics, they really kind of failed the test of do it yourself. Now I think governments and regulatory agencies are going to mandate it. And then I think fast forward, I actually think my kids or my grandkids are going to be saying, Granddad, why is it, how could companies function when they didn't measure and report their people? That seems crazy, because I think once we get past that and everyone starts using that data, we're going to look back at this as literally the dark ages of people measurement. Bad things happen in a dark room, but you turn on the light, transparency solves a lot of problems. Once disclosure happens and transparency improves, companies say, oh, we need to report it, therefore we're going to measure it, therefore we're going to work on it and improve it.
I don't think we're necessarily at our GAP or our IFRS moment. We're kind of at double entry bookkeeping.
I mean, remember, accounting and finance is accounting essentially is 500 years old.
Exactly.
We've got a bit
Exactly.
of a head start on HR.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're not going to cover all the ground. And by the way, they still have standard setting bodies that are working hard on various issues every day
Absolutely.
and meeting on a regular
Absolutely.
basis. So I actually think this is a journey, not a destination, but it's really good to have some metrics out there, some standards, and increasing adoption through, kind of raise the tide, as well as human capital impact, a group of experts that are all working in terms of website. You can check out www.humancapitalimpact.com.